winter months. Just tonight, I'll do a little brief introduction, but you haven't heard to listen to me. And then Polly will take over and wow us with the lovely slides and things. You've probably read the description, but Polly's an amazing writer, particularly looking at nature side of things. Fantastic poet, and she also helps her partner run the historic bookshop in Grasmere, the Sam Reed book, if you read a shop, if you know it. She's also taught English and creative writing at several universities, including our local one in Cumbria and just down the road in Lancaster. I could do with a bit of that, a bit, learn how to write a bit better. But I think you launched your book last week in Edinburgh, Polly, and chatting to her yesterday, I realised that she's been all over the north of England promoting this book. So we are honoured to have you tonight. I'm really thanks you've given up your time. I'm lucky enough to have read Polly's book because her agent sent me a copy in advance of tonight. So I have to say you must get it because it was really descriptive, really beautiful, full of lovely natural history facts. For example, I didn't realise that tawny owls occupy quite a small territory, about 30 to 50 hectares, which I'll touch on in a couple of questions. Also, it talks about our relationship with nature and probably how little we might understand it. At one point, Polly says it's useful to be reminded how limited our knowledge is of the co-inhabitants of our planet. And I think that's very poignant indeed. So the format is we're going to listen to Polly. I've prepared a couple of semi-intelligent questions I'm going to ask her, and then we'll invite you all to either raise a hand or pop your question in your chat, and I'll pick it up as we go ahead. So I'm going to mute myself now and hand over to you, Polly, but thank you.
Thank you, Jack, so much. And thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's a great pleasure to do an online talk tonight, actually, because although I do have my nice book cover coordinated jacket on, which I got specially for all of my events, I don't have any shoes on, which is my preferred state of being. So I'm very happy. And I'm sitting here next to my own fire, and hopefully won't get too many interruptions from my cats. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. I have far too many pictures on my slides, which I'm going to show you as I talk. And I'm going to talk about the Lake District, about dark skies and light pollution, and thinking a little about what and who needs the dark, and what kind of damage light pollution does, and what benefits the light holds. As well as reading a little bit from my book, The Company of Owls, that touches on those same things. So I'm going to start by reading a little bit from the book. I said no interruptions from the cat, and immediately one appears at my foot. I'm going to read you a little bit from the book where I talk about my relationship with the dark, from a chapter that is called The Human Who Was Afraid of the Dark. And I'm going to show you some pictures while I read, and then talk about them a little bit as we go on. Hopefully. Are you now, or have you ever been, afraid of the dark? Of the dark, or what might be moving in it? Of the dark, or a shadow of threat, something lurking just outside your range of vision? When I was a little thing, still squeaking for my parents, I was afraid of the dark. I slept with a nightlight. I slept with the door open a crack to the hallway to let the light and activity of the rest of the house in, to let the quietness in my room out. It was a long time before I realized I was not afraid of the dark in itself, but what the dark held unseen, and the dark itself trapped indoors, trying to lash out defensively. Outside dark was less scary, more unknown. Outside dark was afternoons in winter, cold air thick with leaf mulch and fog, and the promise of bonfires and fireworks and the bright lights of Goose Fair. Outside dark was the moon and the expanse of the sky. Indoor dark was hostile. I was afraid of what might be stuck in that bounded dark with me. I expected things there. Wolves, sneak thieves, monsters, baddies. I slept with my face to the wall, convinced if they entered the room and saw me not watching them, it would buy me essential time to escape or call an alarm. I was the kind of child who worries about these things, who thinks they can control outcomes with rituals. Every night I said to my mum, "See you in the morning," And she had to say, "See you in the morning back," so that we would all arrive into it safely. Like many human children who are afraid of the dark, I read The Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark to teach me to see it differently. Jill Tomlinson's baby barn owl, Plop, thinks dark is nasty and won't go hunting with his parents. As the story unfolds, he learns through others who love the dark that it can be exciting, fun, kind, necessary, wonderful, beautiful, and super. Around the same time, I read Phyllis Arkell's Magic at Midnight, in which all the animals painted on all of the signs of a village's many pubs climb down from their frames as the clock strikes 12 and get up to all sorts. They include, of course, an owl, and my puffin copy of the book had a beautiful watercolour tawny owl on the cover. These stories reframed nighttime as a magical space where the normal rules of mundane day do not apply and anything could happen. I began to see possibilities of the dark. I began to see the dark as a zone of brilliant potential. When I left home, I swapped the faint glow of suburban Nottingham for East London, where atmospheric light meant night was never even close to dark. I used to love how the streetlight threw its orange into my room like a citywide nightlight. It baffles me now when a single LED light in a room can keep me alert till dawn, unable to find the exit from myself into dreams. Then, largely by chance, I moved to the Lake District and cohabited with real dark for the first time in my life. I learned the wonder of a starful sky, how the longer you look up, the more appear, and the deeper you can see into the fabric of the universe. On winter nights, when the stars were sparkling with ice and close enough to touch, I would wrap myself up in my granny's sheepskin coat and lie on the old road by the farmhouse up the road, empty then of everyone but owls and bats, and let myself stretch out into the sky. I learned the dark is never really dark, not outside. I learned that the night is full of colour and sound. I learned the northern lights. I learned the long summer evenings when it barely gets dark at all. I learned to love the night. I learned to love everything that lives in the night. So, I've lived in the lakes for 18 years now, and in that time there have been huge changes in the way the night is lit. When I first lived here, the only lights at night were the odd street lights in the village centre, and for us here in the hamlet of Town End at the edge of Grasmere where I live, this one lamp you can see now opposite Dove Cottage that used to make it feel like Narnia in winter when it snows like that. Within a few years, I started to notice more and more lights, more security lights left on in empty second homes, more lighting on holiday homes, and in the last decade, there has been a proliferation of lit signs for businesses, not just hotels and restaurants and cafes, but shops that are lit up in the evening as well as the day. The quantity and the quality of lights has increased too. Where a decade ago a sign might once have had a kind of single uplighter beneath it, it's now backlit, or the writing itself is lit by LEDs. One hotel in the village became notorious in the last few years for its increasingly bright lights strung around its eaves. Instead of traditional gates, houses are shut behind electronic security gates with LED lit keypads. Burglar alarms, too, are lit like Christmas lights with LEDs shining from the gable ends of barely occupied houses. And the street lights themselves, of course, have been changed to LED lighting, which is brighter and whiter, as car headlights are too. Why does this matter? The evidence that light pollution, and blue light in particular, is damaging both to human and non-human health is incontrovertible and ever growing. Blue light's considered phototoxic and is known to cause macular degeneration in humans and in non-humans, and especially in older humans and small children. As an article by Will Stone in NPR earlier this month that Jack sent me summarizes, in recent decades, scientists have linked light-driven disturbances to all manner of health problems: obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, mental ill health, and other conditions. Scientists have even shown that misalignment of circadian rhythms over relatively short periods of time can mess with blood pressure and how the body handles glucose. To be honest, I think that's only touching on the very tip of what the effects might be. The results of the study that article focuses on should alarm all of us, with a key finding that exposure to brighter nights and darker days causes circadian disruption, which accompanies poor health outcomes that increase mortality risk. What they found was that exposure to incrementally brighter night light predicted higher risk of all-cause mortality, with mortality increasing the greater the exposure to the light during nighttime hours. It was, as they put it, dose dependent. Will Stone summarizes, the study participants with the brightest nights had a 21 to 34% higher risk of premature death compared to those who are mostly in the dark between midnight and dawn. And that's accounting for all other factors as well. It was a very carefully conducted study. I'm one of the estimated 15%, I believe, of humans who are particularly sensitive to artificial light, and especially blue light. And I found this shift in the kind of light that we have really difficult, from struggling to find bulbs for my own domestic lighting that I can bear to be near, to finding environmental lighting increasingly deleterious. Being aware of how this affects me makes me worry about what it's doing to those whose eyes are more sensitive to light than ours are. This is the middle of the village now at past midnight. This was past midnight a few weeks ago when there was an aurora alert, and there was aurora, but you can't see it, can you? These effects have already been evidenced in animals. The same study that I've already referred to states how in animal modes, disruptions of circadian rhythms with light produces profound cardiovascular disease, causing premature death due to cardiomyopathy, extensive fibrosis, and severely impaired contractility. Another study of artificial light at night, which has an acronym ALAN, poor Alan, found it causes a wide range of ecological impacts across diverse ecosystems and poses a particular risk to associated wildlife by disrupting physiology, behavior, and ultimately survival. A 2020 paper found light pollution is a driving factor in insect decline and so impacts the whole food chain. The BTO Tawny Owl Calling Survey, published in 2020, also found that light pollution had a strong negative influence on tawny owl occupancy, assuming that was largely due to effect on the small mammal prey of owls. But the strong evidence suggests light pollution must affect the owls themselves too. For nocturnal hunters like tawny owls, light pollution also impacts prime hunting time. The lighter it is during the dark, the less time they have in the dark to hunt in. Owls, of course, are renowned for their vision and the special nature of their eyes. Owls have exceptionally large eyes for their size, with an exceptionally large number of rods within them that help form a particularly high-resolution image in their brain. Their eyes are more powerful cameras than ours, by far, though with heightened resolution, they lose some color recognition. Owl eyes are different in shape to ours too. They're tubular, not round, which means they can't rotate them in the socket in the same way we can, which is why they need to be able to turn their heads as far as they do, which is 270 degrees, by the way, not all the way around. The size and unusual structure of their eyes might be why they are particularly sensitive to bright lights. And again, this is after midnight in the middle of the village. This too is after midnight from looking down on the village, and you can see how much light there is there from both the road with cars coming down it, but also all the lit buildings in the village, which are lit well into the night. So I'm going to read you another bit of the book, which touches on some of the magic of the night here. And some of the magical things I found in it. And it's from a chapter called Owlets, Owlets, Owlets. 5 days after we first see the pale silvery tawny owl on the common, and 2 days before I watch her flit from tree to tree in the evening sunshine, we are treated to the most extraordinary display of northern lights I've ever been lucky enough to witness. The only time the weather and solar flares have conspired to show us shifting pillars of light in the sky, rather than just a glow. We've been waiting for years for this, and it's worth it. It's luck that we're home, that the sky is clear or clearish, and we're free to go out and look for it when I see an alert online. There's not so much sky from our windows, the roofs of the hamlet's in the way, but even so we can see it, pink and green, with our naked eyes. We put on our boots and coats and set up off the old road to the wishing gate. There's a bitter, icy wind, and it's hard to remember it's April and not midwinter. The stars are vibrating in the uncanny pale pink and green silk of the sky, glinting with cold. There is low cloud moving quickly in the wind, revealing and concealing the moon. It's beautiful, but uncomfortable. Just as we're thinking of coming back down to the house, the pillars rise up from Dunmail Raise, so bright and clear, a kind of lilac white. Through the eye of the camera, they show as violet to pink ombre, neon green at the horizon, deep purple and red above and between. Just as we're repeating myself, sorry. We cross up behind the wood and onto the common. This might be our one chance to see the lights from the top. We know the path so well by now, it is easy in this quasi-dark, this strange pastel aura. We walk past the nest tree, wondering what the owls are doing right now, if they're in there or out in the uncanny light. We imagine we'll meet deer at the top, or staring up at it, the deer and all the ghosts of the common. But it's only us. We are so loud, crunching through the bracken, exclaiming at the sky, anyone would hear us coming from centuries away. It's so cold, and I forgot my hat. I have a cold headache, but I swear I can feel the light pouring down into me. The early bluebells are glowing on the dark hill, as if they've been daubed with UV paint, and the pillars colour match as they skitter over the fell tops. It feels unreal and momentous in a way we cannot understand. We might be dreaming it all, warm in our bed. When I was very little, as soon as I could sit upright, my brothers would turn off the big light and make light shows for me with torches and coloured foils. I would sit propped up in my baby grow, mesmerised by the moving colours in the dark. They would keep me occupied like this for hours. This is what it felt like that night, wonder and magic, as though it was being thrown on the projector screen of the universe, just for us. We don't see them, but we know there are other living beings awake at this hour in this place, under this same revolving light display. Branches cracking in the woods, owls calling, but hidden below. That afternoon we had stood at the same spot and watched a flock of martins pass over from Rydalwater to Grasmere, with the first swallow of summer trailing behind. The blossom on our little apple tree opens at last, and on the 9th we are walking along the path to the common behind the woods in the middle of the afternoon, and look up at precisely the right moment to see 3 tawny owlets looking back at us from the royal balcony of their box. 3 owlets, 3 in a row, squashed up together to peer out and get a good look at us, leaning against each other and jostling for space, their feet clutching the edge of the platform as they shuffle along and into each other. I cannot believe that they are actually there. A perfect trio. You wait for years for an owlet, we joke, then 3 come along all at once. The one on the left-hand side stays upright, alert and watchful, as the one on the right hunches over, then leans into the kind of slanted roof of the A-frame box, and the one in the middle collapses into them both. We watch the trio grow sleepy in their waiting, the owlet on the right curling into itself and toppling forward as it drifts off. It reminds me of myself when it becomes too difficult to hold myself upright, when my blood is pooling in my legs, or when my hypermobile neck is too unstable to prop up my skull. The same excessive flexibility that lets me turn my head like an owl so I can see behind me makes it exhausting to balance the bowling ball of my head on its spindly stem. The other 2 owlets are still moving around as the one on the right plants itself on its front, exhausted by being its little owl self, like a full body sigh. The owl on the left turns, and we can see its feathers look more developed, more grown up than its siblings. Side on, there's a clear size difference too. You can see with these 3 what a difference the days between their hatching make. They seem to have arranged themselves in age order, as though posing for a family portrait. Eldest on the left, restless, bored, and patient. The central one, middle child, leaning and shuffling for space, squeezed on both sides, and the sleepiest owlet, the littlest one, the baby of the babies, all dramatic gestures and not keeping up. My partner Will and I are each the youngest of three. We identify. This little one is just like me, I decide. Look at it. It can't bear the weight of its own fluffy body. The eldest gets tired of waiting and nudges middle child out of the way, clambering back down through the hatch and into the nest. Middle child looks over at sleepy baby, who turns their head to the wall, as if to say, I'll stay here, I'm too tired to move. Then middle child launches himself back through the hole, leaving baby sleeping in the fresh air, turning a little so their back faces the world. Later that evening, I tweet a photo of them with the caption, Owl, my dreams have come true. But I don't expect to see them again. How could I expect such magic to be repeated? Now, you can probably see from these photos that that magic was repeated, and we were very lucky to be able to follow these little owlets around for quite some time over the coming weeks as they spread out through their territory. And I took far too many pictures of them, all of these with a massive zoom lens from a distance away. But it was extraordinary to watch them, and it meant that I spent a lot of time in the twilight in the woods, and then walking home by dark. So I'd kind of leave them as soon as it got too dark for me to see them. And it meant that I was spending even more time outside in these extraordinary skies and some of the particularly amazing solar storms that we have had in the last year or two. So the pandemic's made me palpably aware how little action many people are willing to take to change our shared environments if they believe that it is other people at risk from them and not themselves. I wish I believed there was any hope of getting individuals, communities, councils, developers, and all to care enough about our non-human co-tenants to change the way we use light in our buildings and streets and the kind of light we use. But I don't hold out much hope. I hope understanding that the kind of light and the way we experience it is damaging to our own health too might change that. But honestly, I think we need legislation, and fast. We need more protections against light pollution for human communities and for wildlife. I'd love to see the Lake District National Park act on this. I'd love to see individuals and communities act on it too. In the meantime, we can all do our little bit. Turn lights off when we don't need them. Don't leave security lights on. Think about what actually needs to be lit and what doesn't. If you have Christmas lights out, put them on a timer that goes off before midnight at the very best. Think about the kind of light you use too. Can you change bulbs to warmer coloured ones? Every little bit counts, I think. Every bit of darkness we can preserve matters, both for ourselves and for everybody else who lives in it. I'm going to leave it there and we'll go into some questions.
Thank you, Polly. That was fantastic. I love those images. They're absolutely amazing. I didn't introduce myself at the end. I'm the Dark Skies officer, but I think just listening to you there, I think we'll do a job swap. I'll do some creative writing, and you can try and change all the lights in Cumbria. So I've got a couple of questions, and then make sure you pop your questions in the chat or raise your hand in a second. So what is it? What do you think it was that made you focus in on owls? Because I'm conscious there's a lot of nocturnal activity at wildlife. What do you think it was about the owls which drew you in?
I'm interested in the other things too. I think I just particularly love owls, and they are charismatic animals, and I think I'm definitely guilty of being drawn to them because they are so fascinating and so amazing in so many different ways. And I've loved owls since I was a child. But when I moved here to Grasmere, we had them in our garden growing up, but I didn't really see that much of them. And in my very suburban garden, they were this kind of presence that was a kind of a sense of companionship for me even then. So I always loved animals and birds. But I wasn't allowed a pet, so everything else lived in the garden. I thought of as my pets, which probably isn't a very healthy way of looking at them. But when I moved here to Grasmere, I lived in an attic room, and just literally directly opposite the house I live in now. And the first winter I lived in that room, I realized that it seemed to be surrounded all the time by owls. So there seemed to continually be owls calling outside my window all night, seeming like they were literally sitting on the window ledge. And I found out eventually, when I was writing this book, from my neighbor John, whose house is joined to that house, that he's seen them on the attic windowsill. So they really do kind of come and sit on the windowsill. So they became a kind of marking um, presence of my life here, and I just always accepted them as part of life here. But when I started freelancing in 2017 and was spending more time at home, and I'd kind of go for a walk in the late afternoon most days to make sure that I got outside, and just a kind of walk up the road. And I then saw an owl kind of sitting in a tree in 2017. I saw a tawny owl, who then I started to see regularly. And once you realize that you can see an owl very regularly if you go to the same spot, if you're at all interested in them, it means that you'll just keep going back to see what they're doing. So I realized then that actually that there are loads of owls all around us, and I became increasingly interested in their lives and finding out about how they live and what they're interested in.
I was out with some friends in the Yorkshire Dales at the weekend, and a friend's son went into one of the field barns, and anyway, this
Mm.
barn owl silently came out, and it was just, as you
Oh.
say, it's so inspiring. I've always loved owls as well, particularly, yeah, we've got some lovely different species. Um, just thinking of your book, because as I say, it's lovely descriptive, but it must be a tricky balance between sort of, anthropomorphizing wildlife and putting your own human values on it, but it's still being descriptive enough to reflect the wonderful sense of experience you get from your research and writing the book. Are there any sort of lessons that's helped you your own thinking in terms of nature or nature writing?
Um, in terms of thinking about trying not to anthropomorphize, or
Yeah, or
yeah,
however you see, what
yeah.
lens you see the wildlife in.
I definitely try to. So having begun from this kind of position when I was a child, of kind of thinking, oh, the animals can be my friends, to then I suppose shifting to having a very um basic kind of writerly response of thinking maybe the owls are trying to tell me something, and or the creatures are trying to tell me something, I can learn something from them. um I realized that's also not very helpful, and I wanted to um, try to increasingly, whenever I write about anything which has a life of its own, so any kind of non-human living thing, um, I try to let it have its own thinghood, its own personhood, as it were. Um, and to kind of think of them, particularly something like the owls that live around us here, as um, shared occupants of a shared space in that way, that I think of them as co-tenants um,
I like
of
that
shared
phrase,
space.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that shifts your relationship with them, and then shifts what you think that you might want to write about them as well, and how you might do that to begin with.
I'm going to jump to a question in the chat actually, because I've got one more, but I'll bring in the chat one. We changed some lights near me and Kendall here to a quite a warm colour temperature, and it was really lovely because the people who lived on the terrace, they got hedgehogs back for the first time in the gardens for about 20 years, and then more latterly there was some research that done in Germany, putting trackers on hedgehogs and mapping where they went in relation to various levels of lighting levels. And of course, they went to feed and avoided light at the same time. So the question that can't pronounce your name, it's Baskers in the thing has said, what about owls at night? Have you observed any changes in their behaviour in relation to perhaps some of the exposure to light that you've seen in and around the village?
They're definitely moving around. So I mean, tawny owls are very disturbable.
Yeah.
stop. They're very adaptable, but they don't like noise as well as light. So there's a kind of twin issue, I think, that a lot of the light that's arisen in the village here has also arisen from further development
Yes.
of places. So both the kind of the noise of development and then the light that follows on when the places are developed together kind of shifts their habitats. And it's really interesting to see that the owls seem to roost in gardens which are often quite unoccupied, really. So they'll be in places which are dark and which don't get a lot of human footfall in amongst places which are busier. Um, and so one of the pictures that I showed there was of a barn owl who used to live in a barn up the road here, which has recently been developed into what was meant to be local occupancy housing, but isn't. Um,
That's a whole new topic in
yeah,
itself.
which is a whole new topic. And obviously is all covered with lights as well. And uh yeah, that barn owl has long gone. As soon as even before the development, there were already security lights with the previous owner on the farmhouse that belongs to the barn, and with that the barn owl had gone. Um, and I think that's quite interesting how these tiny things that you think are tiny things can create quite a dramatic shift in the safety of a habitat to a different creature.
No, you're right. I built a good relationship with the lighting team at Cumbria County Council and then into the two unitaries. So I've got them now to adopt an approach for any new rural street lighting, the 2200 Kelvin, which is very warm amber colour, and the dim at 9 by 50%, and then they go off from midnight till 6. Because I read a bit of research saying that particularly for invertebrates and pollinators, even having a very short period of pure darkness was really
Yeah,
helpful. So listening to what you said about the way the owls have been working, I'm sure it'll benefit many species. So that's
yeah.
positive.
And I think you really notice that there are a lot of lights on just simply at times that they don't need to be on.
Yeah.
If they could all just be switched off, even if people think that they absolutely need them at some times, nobody needs them really, unless you're arriving home or leaving for a different work. But then you need to kind of put them on and turn them off. But yeah, they don't need to be on all night, do they? It's not serving a function to anybody, and it's causing a lot of damage as well.
It's probably one of the reasons we were delighted to help promote your new book, was that quite a few of the principles in your book relate to this core ethos of the Friends. So, as well as reducing light pollution and promoting darkness, but very much about leaving no trace, because obviously you observed, as many of us did, an increase in littering sort of coming out of lockdown and things. Um, I often think about 15-minute cities, and I wonder, do you think we should have a campaign about 15-minute tourism, slow tourism? So you can't travel more than 15 minutes from your accommodation. That might
Yeah.
embed people in the local environment and reduce the carbon footprint of dashing around everywhere.
It might also help villages as well, because it might mean that we all had to have, banks and post offices and butchers and co-ops and things again. That might be useful for all of us. All the
Yes.
all the services we used to have.
Yeah, I know. We can only dream. And then obviously thinking of lockdown, which obviously really connected you and many of us to our local areas, and certainly at the time, whether it's still the case, but I think people valued the green spaces on their doorstep a lot more. And quite a few of the conservation charities nationally are working together now and really pushing having access to green spaces on everyone's doorstep. I think that's really, really helpful. And one thing I took from your book, that even if you just pick one species and study it closely, I think de facto you become more connected to your local patch, and then hopefully you might, as you were hinting there, might care for it a bit more. It's a good way, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, whatever species it is, whether it's an insect. There's something everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that often we kind of overlook the local, and I think particularly if you live in an urban environment, um, we're often kind of taught to think devalue that environment essentially, and taught to think we have to go elsewhere to find nature. Um, and there's nature all around us all the time, wherever we are. And if we can kind of find those things and find something local and care about it, it shifts your relationship with the environment that you live in
Mm.
as well. Um, and that can be true of any species, but it's probably also true of owls because tawny owls in particular are, as I said, they don't like noise and they don't like disturbance, but they are quite adaptable. And you will find tawny owls living in large trees in urban back gardens as well, and in churchyards, and they are about the place. So you wherever you are, you'll probably find that there is a local owl for you to observe and see what it does, and see if you can help it in its environment as well.
Emily's popped a question in. She's saying, "How do you think we can convince people to change their lights?" Well, I'll just chip in with a little thing to start with. When I started this job, I realised that there was a lot of astronomers talking to each other.
Hmm.
And when you talk to groups, particularly school children, usually, sadly, only a very small percentage are connected through astronomy. But if you start bringing in other interests like, wild swimming or
Mm.
nature, you generally prick people's conscience. I remember one of the pilot villages we were working with was Lawton. And we interviewed everyone in the village with the parish council, and that's when we decided to change the lights. But one lady was quite angry that two lights on her little lane in Norton, because it's quite higgledy-piggledy, had been taken off when they replaced the telegraph poles, and she was quite angry that the council hadn't replaced them. Anyhow, someone in the parish said, "Oh, she likes the birds." So I mentioned some of the research that you eloquently quoted earlier, and she completely flipped, and she was absolutely delighted these lights weren't on the road, and became one of the best ambassadors in Lawton to tackle light pollution. So, but
I
yeah, you had your thoughts.
Yeah, I
That in
think
your
I think
question.
that is completely the point. That I think a lot of the time people think about human safety,
Yes,
and they
yes,
they also so they're thinking about, will I fall over? Will I be safe at night? Um, which are important concerns, and I think concerns that need to be addressed, but ones which can't be solved by having a kind of lighting that's actually detrimental to human health as well as everyone else's health. So for me, I do think part of it is better public information that kind of light is damaging, because I felt it, but I didn't know the research for quite a long time myself, even
yeah,
though I knew that uh, especially kind of early forms of energy saving LED lights, I simply could not be near them. I found them, yeah, like almost kind of instant headaches and eye problems. Um, but the kind of research that's been done now that shows how widespread those effects are, and in a larger sense, like that recent study showed just how any kind of excessive lighting at night is really bad for human health. um, should be something that should convince people to make a change. Although sometimes we're, as a species, we're our own worst enemy a lot of the time as well, aren't we? So I think you kind of have to drip feed things, I think, kind of going,
yeah,
well, it's bad for us. Some people will care that it's bad for us. Some people will care that it's bad for nature and for the other things we care about. Because it's so many things. As you said, it's hedgehogs, it's insects. Some people don't care that much about insects, although they might care about glowworms because they're more charismatic. Again,
yeah,
that terrible word. But glowworms are quite exciting, and if light is really bad for glowworms, maybe that's something that interests more people than would care about moths or would care about beetles. Maybe more people care about hedgehogs for similar reasons, that people really love hedgehogs, than might care about foxes, for instance. So trying to find something that different groups of people care about. Um, I think to be honest, I think it could be quite useful that so many people are now interested in astrological phenomena and things like
Yes.
the Northern Lights as well. So
Yeah.
the amazing solar storms that we've been having, um, you want dark skies to be able to properly enjoy those things. So that could be quite useful in a way to make people think about, well, what is going on? How far
Mm.
do you have to go to see something clearly? It shouldn't be as hard as it is for a lot of people.
No, I think you're right. I think the Aurora Alert app has engaged, millions, hasn't it, in the night sky. I remember friends of mine went to Iceland to see the Northern Lights, and that was in May when we had that amazing. So I was
Yeah.
taking the Mickey on WhatsApp. Well, why have you gone all that way? We've got better
Yeah.
Aurora.
I was so excited on that night that all of my photographs are really, really wobbly because I was I was just too excited.
Can you read the chat, Polly? Because Claire's written a very good point here about she bought this solar censored light thinking it was a really good quality light, but she didn't realize when it came on how light polluting it was. And she's saying, do we think there should be a bit of guidance when you purchase lights? And I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, I think there really should be. I think warnings on because it's become really common as well, hasn't it? You know,
Yeah,
it's another of these things that in the same way as kind of more security lights are on the outside of houses. Um, and the idea that you just leave things on as well. I think that there's been a kind of odd effect of kind of energy saving lights that, I mean, I know I was brought up by older parents, but who grew up through rationing, but they were very much kind of the kind of people
same
who
here.
were like, you know, you turn the light on when you go into a room, you turn it off when you leave the room. You never leave a light on when you don't need a light on. You know, it was really rammed home to me throughout my childhood. So it always feels really naughty to me if I leave a light on, even when I'm in a different room in the house. Like I'm always putting off the upstairs lights when my partner's left it on when he comes downstairs.
I think we're peas of a pod because I'm
Yeah,
third sibling, and I'm just like that. I
yeah,
switch
yeah.
everything off.
Um, but I think that the kind of weird effect of energy saving lights is that people then don't think about the cost effect or the kind of light pollution effect of them. So we have so many more lights that are on anyway, but also all these great solar powered lights make us think, oh, they're fantastic, they're great things. You can pop them in the garden. They deal with their own energy source. And then they kind of go on, and we don't think about the ongoing impact of that. And I bought them a few years ago. I thought this would be really nice, and I popped them in the garden, and I didn't even realize that they kind of came on by themselves. I don't know why I didn't think of that until I saw them. I was like, what's glowing from the dark? And it was these little lights. But they do have a kind of short time on them, so they're only on for a certain amount of time at least. Um, but I don't know. I think a whole change in the way those work would be useful. I think more information on the packaging, maybe akin to
Mm.
what we have on cigarette packages, could be quite useful. But also more options with those things. So can we have lights that you can program so they only come on for a certain amount of time, um, and go off again, so you don't have to think about it and you don't have to go in and kind of turn them off. Um, I stayed at a lovely a kind of bothy thing a while ago, which is beautiful. And they'd strung all these lovely fairy lights out outside, and they were solar lights, but they were on all night, and I had to go and switch them all off because they were shining in
Well
the
done.
window.
Near me and Kendall, these people, everyone has them. This couple of just light the garden and house, and I wouldn't mind, but they do it for about 3 months. Never mind just Christmas. So, but it's become a tourism attraction in itself. It drives me mad.
And I can see why, because it's pretty and it's
Yeah,
nice, and we like on a kind of human level it looks nice and it looks cozy, and it's a really pretty thing, but they don't have to be on all the time. And I think that's the shift, isn't it, to thinking, um can you have them so that you switch them on when you need them, you turn them off again, or they're on a timer so that they only come on for a
yeah,
few hours,
yeah.
um and
Laura's just
limit it.
looking at. Oh, sorry. I was just looking at the chat. Laura's saying she lives in Birmingham, and it's been really helpful to learn these lessons and things about the value of darkness. I think that's right. I was brought up the top of the North York Moors, the Cleveland Hills. So off the top, I didn't know anything about lighting at the time, but you'd look towards Teesside and you wouldn't see any stars. You
Yeah.
turn round, look to the south to the Vale of York, and you'd have thousands of stars. And I'm giving a talk next week in Spennymoor, a lighting manufacturer, to the Lighting Institute. I'm calling it thinking outside the boundaries. So the core message is you can put dark sky lights everywhere, and don't just put them in a dark sky reserve and forget the rest, because light pollution doesn't
Yeah.
respect any boundaries in the sky. It spreads for miles and miles everywhere, doesn't it?
Exactly. I did an event in Carlisle yesterday evening,
Oh yeah,
driving up it was quite because it was a very cold night last night as well.
yeah.
That kind of frozen fog forming by the time we left as well. And we were driving down the M6 at one point. And I was like, what is that glow in the sky? I was thinking, is that aurora? And no, it was the way the light from an industrial estate was refracting through the frozen fog, looked like the strangest unearthly glow that you've ever seen. And you kind of forgot that because I grew up in Nottingham, and
Oh yeah.
we had a lot of environmental light all of the time. Um, Not a complete kind of light out at that point in the 80s and 90s. But it does mean that, that the constellations that I know are the constellations which push through that. So I could always find Orion because Orion was always there, even through the street lights. But it's one of the things that absolutely made me fall in love with Grasmere. The very first night that I stayed here was a very clear um, summer night in 2016. Sorry, 2016, 2006, skipping a decade.
Yeah.
And I sat outside and the stars absolutely blew my mind. I'd never seen anything like it in the UK. It was absolutely amazing. And I still feel like that every time I go out on a clear night, and you can see this entire extraordinary universe up there.
Tracy's popped a good question in the text there. You can see because in your book you're very much focused on the owls and picked up other things, but she was asking, have you noticed how, perhaps a family of crows or other wildlife are affecting how owls behave? Did you notice much of that when you were out
Yeah,
on observations?
definitely. Uh, so there's a couple of different owls and different generations of owls who feature in the book.
Mm,
And at one point, um, there was a new owl trying to settle in a particular territory, and we
mm.
kept seeing it being absolutely mobbed by songbirds. So quite often we'll find the tawny owl because of what I call the blackbird alarm. So
Yeah.
if all the blackbirds are going off, then it's normally because there's something nearby that they don't like. But quite often for us, it is that the tawny owl is sitting in a tree
Yeah.
and the blackbirds are all shouting about it. But yeah, we had a couple of times where we saw all sorts of different birds kind of ganging together to try and see the owl off, and stop them from sitting there. So yeah, I would think a large family of crows or a big kind of roost of crows might be quite off-putting to an owl.
Well, they often get picked on owls, don't they? People have little model owls near the ponds and things
Yeah.
to attract birds. Sometimes it seems a bit of a shame. Ballast's made a very really perceptive point in the chat there, if everyone can see it, about light representing modernity, and then actually reflecting consumption, as you say. Actually, there was a bit of work done, and it showed that in the sort of Western developed, so-called developed nations, light pollution on average was increasing 10% a year, including Britain. So it's critical that we all start acting on it now. And there's still a
It
perception that darkness brings fear, brings some people are anxious at night, and we need
and
to give
and it's
people a
really,
confidence again, I think,
yeah.
to
I think
embrace the night.
having confidence in the dark is really important, because
Mm,
I see that a lot, and you see it a lot from women's groups that, for instance, that the dark becomes a kind of fearful place, but the dark itself is not an enemy. And I think we need to kind of recalibrate those relationships and think, well, what is the actual problem? Is the problem the dark or not? Um, and to become more familiar with it. And also because as I say in the book and kind of slightly said there in that talk, that most of the time the night isn't actually very dark, even if you're in a place that
Yeah.
doesn't have light pollution. The night is all sorts of other things. Like last night there was an extraordinary moon as well, a beautiful kind of just over half moon. Um, and there's such a extraordinary joy to being outside in moonlight and in starlight. And I think for so many people, we're so averse in the developed world um, to being outside in the dark, and to so associate the dark with fear and anxiety and otherness and danger in different ways, that we don't experience all of those things that are wonderful about it. So I think getting to know the dark more would be really good for all of us.
I liaise with Professor Nick Dunn. He's at the Design Centre at Lancaster University, but lives in Manchester, and he does walks and talks at night in cities, and he very much touches on what you were saying there about giving people confidence and embracing the night and enjoying it. Well, there's no more in the questions in the chat. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. You want to raise your hand? I can see everyone on the screen, but as I say, I so enjoyed your book. As someone who likes nature, I couldn't put it down. So I'm going to look up your other books, Polly, and I'll do a bit of marketing for you here. There's you've written two poem books. One, the basic nest architecture, much with body. I love these titles. I love the titles. Never mind reading them. And then the one I definitely want to read is about your learning of your illnesses, because I've got chronic Crohn's disease, so I have to learn to live with that as well on a daily basis. Some of us just fall. I think I'm definitely going to read a couple more of your books. So I would encourage everyone to look those up. I certainly will be doing.
Thank
Um,
you. And there's also some wonderful books about, someone's just put in the chat if people are interested in health problems with LED light,
yeah,
look at Light Aware. That's really important. And there's some really interesting books that touch on this as well. Um, Weirdly, my book about Dorothy Wordsworth, Recovering Dorothy,
yeah, I didn't mention that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
the metadata got confused with a book called Incandescence, which is about
Mm.
LED lighting, which felt like a kind of a really odd thing for me, because I was like, how did they know that I'm very sensitive to LED lighting? It has nothing to do with me whatsoever, but the metadata had just got confused online. And there's Danny Robinson's wonderful book,
Yes, I've read Danny's book. Yeah.
about the night sky. And there's quite a few that have come out in the last few years as more and more of this research comes out as well. So there's some great further reading to do, whether you're interested in the kind of scientific papers or in more public facing nonfiction about it too. So lots of good awareness raising as
Yeah,
well.
but you're right. Eleanor's sister Anna wrote Incandescent, and it is an amazing book. And I think she's got another book out. Oh yeah, Matt Gore. Someone said
Yes, Under
I've
the Stars.
Matt,
Yeah.
Matt Gore gave a talk when we had the lockdown Dark Sky Festival
Yeah.
all online. And yeah, his book Under the Stars was really good. Um, Anyhow, I think we should wrap up, Polly. I would just, on behalf of everyone, thank you very much indeed. And please, this is the one, everyone. Oh, can you see it? Get reading the Company of Owls.
Thank you all
Um,
so much.
there's some
Yeah,
lovely comments in the chat there. Look,
lovely.
thanking you. So thank you. And we're going to wing you a free membership tomorrow to say thank you for
Ah,
supporting us. And hopefully, yeah, hopefully we'll keep in touch and things.
and we can go and make it darker out there together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm chipping away. It's hard work, but I'm chipping away. But thank you everyone for attending. And as I say, keep an eye on the festival. There'll be lots more events. And get yourselves into Sam Reader book in Grasmere. That's what I would say.